timetable when you could see license plate readers in Quincy.
Tonight, the police aldermanic committee met to review public concerns and police proposals for the request to bring 20 automated license plate readers to the city. And WGEM's Charity Bell joins us with more on their decision. Charity.
Daniel and Mackenzie, tonight the Police Aldermanic Committee voted to table the item. Committee Chair Alderman Tony Sasson made the motion, seconded by Alderman Mike Ryan. Ryan says they're getting more questions that he feels are necessary to consider. He wants to take the proper time to vet the proposal before the committee sends it to the full council to consider. A flock representative attended the meeting tonight to address residents' concerns.
It's particularly good with amber alerts and senior alerts, or silver they call them, but you know, some old guy wanders off in his car and forgets where he's going, and he could end up 200-300 miles away. Anything that's going to save that guy's life, it's probably worth having that technology available to us. So there's some really good things. And security of the data is the biggest issue, maybe the only issue.
All of the data that is collected will be owned by the Quincy Police Department. Only they can share that data within the system for legal law enforcement purposes. Any searches that they perform, there is an audit trail too, and Flock will never share or sell that data.
Ryan says he doesn't think this is a one-sided issue because he and other aldermen have constituents who are both for and against the proposal. Charity Bell, WGEM News.
All right, thank you, Charity. And the flock safety representative also says they will hard delete the data stored after 30 days. And he says after that, no one will be able to access it, not even Flock, Amazon Web Services, or Quincy Police. In addition to that, he says Flock does not do business with the federal government, so the company wouldn't be able to share data with them.